Hey everyone, Chris here with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Southeast Florida. Hanging out on my little nifty golf cart that I just realized that I threw away the battery. I didn't throw it away. I thought it was a welding machine and I gave it to my scrapper. Let me try to balance this on here perfect. I gave it to my scrapper because I thought it was a welding machine and I didn't know if it worked or how to test it. And I was like, fuck it. And I gave it to him, not realizing that it was for the golf cart the whole time. So I know there is a manual way to charge these things. We're probably just gonna post it online for like 250 bucks, and you know, someone wants a cheap golf cart that they can go spend the money to get a used charger for, then they have a working golf cart. Overall, it's in pretty good condition. The wheels aren't too bad. They may need a little bit of air, but that's about it. So I'm just gonna hang out in it in the meantime because it's actually pretty nice. And worst case, if it doesn't sell, I'll tell my scrapper, hey, throw me like 50 bucks, tear this thing apart and scrap it. I mean, this thing is heavy as fuck, so you know, I mean, there's gotta be some scrap value, and it's pretty much all metal besides the plexiglass windows and the cushion chair. Otherwise, everything else is metal. So, I just had a comment on my cleanout video that we just got done doing. Took us realistically 2 days to do the job, and they asked, how did I come to the 6,000 for the job, considering it's all like spread out and stuff, and like what charges we did. So, I'm not gonna get into the specific pricing numbers of how we charge, but I will talk about what I like to do personally. And I think I've made a video about this. I'll try to find it and tag it up above. That's probably a little bit better suited than what I'm about to describe, especially now that there's someone in my background sawing on a table saw. But basically what I personally like to do to make things as easy as possible for myself is I go room by room in a house. Doesn't matter if it's a 1-bedroom apartment or if it's a 3-bedroom house. I go room by room. I look all around and say, okay, how much of a truckload is this room specifically? If you needed 2 cubic yardage, if you can just look and say, okay, if I were to place this in my truck, this is roughly how much room it would take up, then do that. Whatever's easier for you. Someone's grabbing my planter pots. Nice. And what I do is I do that for every single room. And while I'm there, I'll look around and say, okay, are we gonna have to bag up all the stuff on the ground? Am I gonna have to bag up all the things in the closet, take stuff out of the bathroom and the cabinets? You know, there are a bunch of clothes we need to bag up. You don't have to bag stuff. We do because we donate and we have containment. We like to contain things. If you're not worried about doing all that, then just throw it in your truck and go dump it. Doesn't matter. But we like to bag things because it makes it easy. And I do think there's a lot of perks to the efficiency of being able to bag it up and bring it out to the truck versus going there like in lump sums, carrying everything like that. Or if you have trash cans, you can fill them up and dump them. Whatever is easier. Doesn't matter. Everyone does things a little bit differently. So we go room by room, and I'll basically assess every single room as if it's a job on its own. So I go to a main bedroom. All right, you got a king bed, 2 nightstands, you got a long dresser with a mirror, and you have a chest. All right, it's probably gonna be about half a truck, maybe 5/8. You have a closet full of clothes. Let's say 2 bagging fees. A bagging fee for us is 10 bags, and we charge a number that is basically there to cover our extra time and help cover the cost of bags. And I'll look around and say, okay, this room's gonna be half a truck, 5/8. I'm gonna need 2 bagging fees for this big old closet, and I'll write that down in my notes. And then I'll move on to the guest bedroom. All right, guest bedroom has a queen bed, 1 dresser, 1 nightstand, and maybe like a little corner desk. Okay, it's probably gonna be like 3/8 of a truck. No closet, cool, don't have to worry about bagging fee. And then I go into the bathroom. Not a ton, maybe like just 1 individual bag. I'll just keep that in my mind. And then I'll go onto the living room, has multiple couches, armoire, coffee table, end tables, TV credenza, maybe a couple of things we need to empty out to bag up. Cool. Let's just say that's 3/4 of a truck. Move on to the dining room and so on. You repeat the process over by over. And then at the end of it, I'm gonna go by my notes and I'm just gonna add it all up by the increments. We charge by quarter increments, so quarter, half, 3/4, full load. If you do 8s, add it up by 8. If you do 10s, 16s, add it all up. It all is fractions. You can add fractions. It's a really cool concept. So you just add up how much total volume you have, and then you add up your bagging fees if you're gonna do that. If you're not gonna do bagging fees though, keep in mind that the stuff that you are bringing out, although it's not a big dresser, over time that will take up space. I know a couple people that went to go give a really big estimate for a clean out, and they basically just charged for all of the furniture, and then they ended up bringing, they used trash cans. That's why I use that example. They filled up like 30 or 40 trash cans of just clothes and dishes and all kinds of stuff, and they were just chucking it in their dump trailer, not realizing that takes up room. And they were like 2 loads over what they had quoted, and I was like, it's probably because you didn't charge for all of that extra stuff. Ignore my bug zapper, by the way. That's our guilty pleasure, because we are surrounded by mosquitoes, so we live on a lake. Watching them just crumple, so exciting. So I told him, I was like, it sounds like you didn't charge for all that little stuff, and that adds up. You take a mountain of clothes from a closet and dump it on the ground, and all of a sudden it's the same cubic yardage as a dresser. It's just not as heavy. Sometimes it may be. So I go around, do that room by room, add it all up, and then there's my number. If we have, let's say we have a bunch of little small things in the back patio and it's a long walk to get around the front yard, we might tack in a time charge. If we have stairs, we tack in a time charge. If it's an apartment building and you have like a long hallway to go down to get to the apartment, then we'll charge for extra time. If we are in a high-rise building, even if it's right by both elevators, it's usually a delay with elevators because people call it, the stops, repeat the process. The time adds up. If you really want to test it, you can time yourself one day, like without rushing. Just time yourself normal pace and watch how often the elevator gets stopped and how much time it realistically takes up. I promise you it's gonna surprise you. So we charge extra timing for anything that takes us longer. We follow the national average of how long it should take to fill up a truck. It's basically 2 hours for a full load, an hour and a half for 3/4, hour for a half hour for a quarter. A minimum pickup should be like 5 minutes. 1/8 of a truck should be like 15 minutes or less. So obviously most jobs you do aren't gonna take that long to do unless you're doing a mixture of bagging and taking big stuff, or you have like a little bit of a walk or something like that. I think those numbers are kind of exaggerated, but again, this is franchise numbers. These are guys that, yeah, they do junk removal and they might have been doing it for a while, but they're probably not the most efficient for the most part. Not everybody, but you know, coming from franchises, I would say you're gonna have a good mixed bag of people that are not efficient and thinking of time purposes of let's get this done fast. So they basically allow X amount of time to get the job done, and anything that they think is going to alter that time, they charge for. So that's the reason behind it. But that's simply what we do. It's the easiest thing I have found. If we go to a storage unit or a hoarder house and you walk in, you open up the door and like to the bedroom, like it's just floor to ceiling all the way back. You can't even see the back wall. That was a good one. You can't even see the back wall. I treat it like a storage unit. When I go to storage units to give estimates, assuming like it's like full, I follow a formula of, I basically take I don't find the volume of my truck per se. I'll just look at my dimensions. So I have a 6.5 by 14 foot truck. If I just ran down to 6 feet, you knock off 4 feet from the length and add it to the width, you have a 10 by 10 space. Now my trailer is 5 feet tall. In a storage unit, if you have a 10 by 10 storage unit, same size, right? Most storage units that have that cage at the top are 8 feet tall. So I know, okay, if I took this storage unit, which is full floor to ceiling, and it's a 10 by 10, you can't add any more volume to this thing. If I slice that in half at the 5 foot mark, I already know that's one load in my trailer, 100%. And then anything above that, so that extra 3 feet, I'm gonna say, okay, that's about what, 2/3. So I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that a 10 by 10 storage unit full floor to ceiling is gonna be like a truck and 3/4 for me. And then we'll tack in any surcharges. So if I go into a hoarder house and their bedroom, you can't even see past, I'll charge it the same way. I'll look at this 10 by 10 bedroom full of furniture and miscellaneous and say, okay, this is gonna be at least a truck and 3/4. We're probably just gonna round it up to 2, just because it may be an awkward fit for some things. And then we'll figure, okay, of all this stuff, is there a lot of small loose things, which most cases there are in hoarder houses? We're gonna go ahead and throw in some extra time or some extra bagging fees to make up for that difference from what we normally charge. So that's just how we personally like to do things. That's another one. That's how we personally like to do things. If you have a different method, stick with it. You know, that's just what we do. I have an invoice app. I'm gonna be switching to autopilot pretty soon once Andrea is done yelling at me for not doing it yet. And in my invoice app, I literally take pictures of every room and I add them to my estimate, and I'll say living room, kitchen, bedroom, guest bedroom, dining room. And if there's anything the client wants to stay or tells me I'm not taking, I'll make a note for that so that way it reflects the estimate. And I'll just use those photos for the estimate just so the customer sees I saw the same thing that they see. And then I'll just throw in how many loads it added up to, how many bagging fees there are, how many time charges there are. It's all saved in items, and it's like an itemized list. And I won't go super crazy with adding like 10,000 little individual charges, because that's usually a turnoff for most people. But I'll usually stick to the basics. I'll do bagging, I'll do volume, and we'll do time. Every now and then I'll tack in like a heavy item charge that they can see, because I can't add it to my full load price and have that one load be different pricing than everything else, if that makes sense. And I'll usually explain to people what the heavy item fee means. But that's pretty much just what we do. I found it to be the most helpful. If I'm kind of unsure, or if it spits out a really big number, I'll go back and double check and say, okay, was I just being careless, or am I accurate? And most times I'm accurate, or I'm even a little bit under. I'm not perfect. So especially when it comes to bigger loads. So if you're gonna give a quote for a big job, whatever number you come out to, I would keep that as your lower range. And then I would add a little bit to it and tell the customer it's gonna be between this and that. So let's say for this job, for example, I quoted $6,305. If I wanted to, I could tell the realtor or whatever, I could say, hey, I think this is gonna be like 63 to 6,600, depending on the actual volume. We might be off just a smidge because it's hard to dictate how much bagging takes up, something like that. And at least that way, even if I'm off by half a truck, obviously a half a truck is more than $300, but at least I can cap it at that mark without going over it, and I still make up for that difference a little bit without really, making a big fuss out of a big job already. Figure out something that works for you, and practice it. If it works, it works. Try it and get better at it. If it doesn't work for you, do something else. There's people who charge by square footage. There's people who charge by cubic yardage strictly. Like, they don't even calculate what it looks like in the truck. They just strictly go, all right, deep freezer, 1 yard, refrigerator, 2 yards, couch, 3 yards, love seat, 2 yards, bed, 2.5 yards, dresser, 2 yards, nightstand, stack it, 1 yard. There's people who do that. I do that sometimes too. But I find that going room by room and adding it all up is the easiest and the least likely for me to make a mistake. So hopefully that helps if you're curious about that. And like I said, if you have your own way of doing it, stick to it. But that is it for me. I am going to continue cleaning out my yard because we are extremely outside of HOA guidelines. I'm not even supposed to have this golf cart in the driveway, but I don't have anywhere else to put it. So hopefully it sells fast. If it doesn't sell, probably within a couple weeks, we're gonna scrap it. I'm just gonna throw a tarp over it and put some bricks on top and hope no one asks us any questions. So that's gonna be it for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.